Welcome to the ISO Show, dispelling myths and sharing tips for success to improve your business with ISO standards, with your host, Mel Blackmore.
Hi, and welcome to the ISO Show. Thanks very much for joining me in this episode today. We're actually going to be picking up on where we left off with Steve Mason in the previous 3 episodes on the changes to the brand spanking new ISO 27001-2022. So although the standard came out at the end of 2022, organisations are now starting to think about their plans for transition. So hopefully this is good timing, because although organisations have got a couple of years to make that transition, we know from years of experience that when standards get updated and companies have 2 to 3 years, there's generally a bit of a rush in the last year, and that causes all sorts of major problems. Problems for clients and also problems for certification bodies in being able to help businesses to fit in their transition visits. So I would strongly recommend thinking about what you're going to do for your transition plan at the beginning of 2023, so you've at least got everything in place ready for 2024, which then just gives you a year ahead to then, before the deadline, because what the last thing that you want to do is to risk losing certification, which has happened in the past with some organisations that have left it too late, or it's cost them an awful lot more money because they're paying for additional visits from that certification body. So by planning in advance, you can not only get ahead of the game and implement the changes, but you can reduce costs and make the most of the PR opportunities from being one of those early adopters for transitioning to the new standard. And as we heard in the previous episodes, there are quite a number of changes. So just to recap on that, in the previous episodes we mentioned that there are changes to 56 controls, which are being merged into 24 newly titled controls and 11 completely new controls. And all of the controls have now been placed into 4 themed sections instead of the 14 control groups from the old standard which you've currently got in place at the moment. Now, we've got an awesome guideline on all of the changes to ISO 27001-2022, and they're available if you go over to our website. So you can access this if you go onto www.blackmoresuk.com. There'll also be a link to that in our show notes, so whichever media player you're listening to listen to this podcast, you'll be able to get a link to that. So that's your very own free guideline to the changes to ISO 27001. So that's where we summarise some of the things that Steve was talking about in terms of the changes. So the 56 controls being merged into 24 newly titled controls, 11 new controls, and we've now got all of that into 4 themed sections, which include organisational, people, physical and technological. So don't forget to click onto the show notes and to get that free download, because that's going to be an invaluable resource just to give you a top level overview on the changes. Now, the purpose of the next couple of podcasts is to share with you some insights on how we help organisations to manage the transition to successfully get certified to 27001-2022. So over the next couple of episodes, I'm going to be guiding you through what you need to be doing over the coming months or even year, which is planning the transition. You can't just necessarily expect to go through that transition without doing anything at all next week. There is a bit of planning and preparation to do, and I'm just going to explain about some of the things that you need to take into consideration and some of the pitfalls to avoid. How to learn about the new controls and the changes that are coming. Exposing, so that's looking at identifying the opportunities for improvement by introducing the new changes. the creation and implementation of those changes. So there isn't much point in understanding about the requirements and identifying where the gaps are if we're not going to take action. So we'll be talking about the implementation and then finally getting ready for that transition visit from your certification body. So that could be a visit in person or it could be an online transition audit. So that's what I'm going to be taking you through over the next 3 episodes. So they're only going to be very short episodes, short and sweet, but hopefully I can kind of break it down into chunks for you so it's a bit more manageable. So in terms of the steps that we would take you through, they're all included within our signature transition program to make all the changes that you need for ISO 27001. So although I'm going to be breaking this down in separate sections for you, just to give you a high level overview of what that signature transition program entails, we would include a video. So that's a 1-hour video in terms of what's new, what do we need to update and add, and breakdown of the 4 critical areas. And we'll also be explaining about planning and preparation for the transition visit from the certification body. And then we have a day allocated for the transition action plan completion. That's followed by the implementation support. So that can be anywhere between 1 and 3 days on updating and implementing the changes to your information security management system. And then that's followed by internal audit support. So we allocate just 1 day to audit the new changes, so the new bits. So it's not an entire audit of your ISMS, it's just purely down to those changes. So that gives you the reassurance and confidence that the changes that have been put in place are actually working effectively and, of course, that they meet the requirements of the standard. And then finally, we offer some optional support as part of that programme to basically hold your hand throughout that certification body transition visit. Okay, so that could be 1 or 2 days that we would be with you. We would be acting as an ambassador for the 27001-2022 standards changes in your organisation. So we're not going to be giving the assessor all of the answers, of course, because it's your management system, but we help to act as a coordinator and basically facilitator to ensure that the assessor has all of the information that they need and you're put at ease because you know that we're there to support you. We've got your back. Okay, so that's our signature transition programme. And over the next couple of episodes, I'm going to be breaking that down because although we offer that support as a service, obviously there's nothing from stopping you from doing all of that yourself. Okay, so whether you do it yourself or whether you want to work in collaboration with a partner like Blackmores, then we're there to support you. So we're just sharing with you what we would take our clients through. And we've already been working with a number of clients on this transition, as Steve had mentioned in the previous episode. So this is also speaking from experience of going through this process. Okay, so the first phase is the planning phase. So this is where you need to consider when you're actually going to go for the transition with the certification body. And then you work back from that. So if your next annual surveillance visit for ISO 27001 is in March, you're unlikely to implement the changes by then. Now you might be thinking, why should I combine it with the next surveillance visit? Well, each certification body is different, and I would strongly recommend speaking with each certification body, and hopefully after these episodes have gone out, we'll be getting a better understanding for what each certification body is doing, and I might be able to give you a bit of an update on that in due course. But what we've heard so far and what our experience has been so far is that clients can either include the transition as an extra half a day. Sometimes there is a desktop review that's carried out before the next surveillance visit. But in order to reduce costs, it's generally organised at the time of your surveillance visit. So the first thing is to look at when your next ISMS surveillance visit is. If it's over 6 months, I would definitely recommend looking at seriously considering having that as your transition visit. So if it's, say, October, November, December, I would definitely look at booking that in. And then obviously if you've just had a surveillance in January, you're looking at 12 months from now. So you're looking at planning your transition for January 2024. But again, you need to work backwards in terms of updating the management system and implementing it and auditing against it. So you've got all of that evidence in place in readiness for that transition visit. So that's the first thing, is the planning off the date and then working backwards. You've got an opportunity to draw a line in the sand there, inform your leadership team and any other people that are going to be involved in this process. So they've got ample time to plan, prepare and allocate time in the diary to help you to make it happen. And of course, we facilitate this as well in terms of coordinating activities and those involved. So before we actually start on the implementation, it's really important that you understand the changes to the controls. So yes, we've provided an update on some of the controls and we've only done that at a high level. But what we've done is we've created 11 coffee break training courses. So these are courses that can be undertaken, during the time that you might have a coffee, to understand the ins and outs of the different clauses. The benefit of that is you're getting a great insight into the interpretation of those changes. So we'd strongly recommend that, and that's what we would include within this signature transition program. We will also have that content in the Isology Hub from March onwards. So if you're an Isology Hub member, you get access to all of that. So that's really important to help you to understand what's involved in terms of the changes. And another offer that we're doing, which is only available up until the 1st of April, is we're including a free copy of ISO 27001-2022. Because we feel it's really important that you've got access to the standard, you've read it, you understand it, as well as obviously all the training that we will be providing you with. And also, the certification body assessor may ask to see a copy of that standard because it has been known. We've been through hundreds of assessments with certification bodies, and sometimes they'll ask the question, could you show me a copy of your standard? Because it can be classed as an other requirement when it comes to legal compliance, so, statutory, regulatory and other requirements. So that has caught out some companies in the past. So with all of our projects, we include a copy of the standard because we think that that's critical, for all of our clients to have that. So this is just an offer that we've got on until the 1st of April, as I say, to include that within our signature transition program. So once we've done that, we can then expose where you're currently at the moment. So Steve Mason has produced a fantastic transition checklist document that will not only explain about the controls in detail, but it will have several links and guidance about each control. And we use that as a checklist to identify whether that control is being met or not. And later on, we also use it as an audit tool as well. So this is a fantastic document to be able to identify what your current strengths are in relation to 27001-2022, where the gaps are, and it provides a really clear action plan to deduce what the next steps are. So that's fundamentally important to beginning your journey and transition to 27001. So I hope that's given you an insight into the first phase, the planning stage and the discovery phase of understanding about the controls before we can then start to look at what action we're going to take. And before I go, just a quick reminder about the awesome transition guide that we've got available, which outlines all of the changes to the standard and it gives you great insight into the next stages as well. So that's all for now from me. Thanks very much for listening, and tune into the next episode of the ISO Show, where I'm going to be talking about the next stage, which is all about the implementation.
Looking to use ISO standards to drive better business practice? Contact us at blackmoresuk.com to access further information and book your free 15-minute call.